Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope your week is going great, as I always say. In this video, I'm going to talk about some encounters with the FAE. So, there's not going to be a real structure to this video, it's just an interesting topic. So, as always, pull up a stump, and let's jump into it. Thank you for watching. I'm telling this story as it was told to me by my grandma. I was very young, so I don't remember any of this, but here we go. So I was 5 years old, and I just learned how to ride the bike without any training wheels, and I feel like an absolute top-tier Chad. So my mom was doing something in the backyard, probably watering her tulips at the time or something. My mom was the very protective type. Anywhere I would go, she would follow me. Understandable, given that I was a really stupid kid. So, I decided to use this as a chance to ride off somewhere that I have never been before. I went missing for 5 hours. My mom enters panic mode. She starts calling up everyone she knows to help her find me. My dad's hunting buddy and his dog found me sleeping in a field near a forest entrance around 5 kilometers away from my house, 3.1 miles. He picks me up and takes me to his home. He calls up my mom and dad, saying that he found me. When they came to get me, they asked me how I got there and where my bike was. Apparently, I told them that a blonde lady took me by the hand and asked me to dance with her, and that I left the bike not too far from my house, which they later found parked in my neighbor's fence. Now, of course, unsurprisingly, nobody believes me. Everyone just refuses the thought. So, fast forward to about a week after that. My dad goes to harvest wheat near the place that I fell asleep, and he spots something strange, a little out of the ordinary. Mushrooms started growing in a circular pattern on the very place where I was sleeping. In my culture, mushrooms growing in a circular pattern are a sign that fairies have been dancing there. He told the family about the sighting. My grandma at that point tells them about the fairy story where fairies kidnap young children, mushroom circles appear, and so on and so forth. They still have a hard time believing in that, but they do admit that my experience has too many similarities with the myth for it to be just a coincidence. So yeah, apparently I was kidnapped by fairies when I was about 5. I'm going to share a story that my dad told me about him as a kid, meeting what he thought was a fairy. So my dad was walking around a field with a cousin, and they come across this beautiful mansion, and this girl approaches him and his cousin, and she's extremely beautiful. Something about her looks is almost inhuman, like the most beautiful person you could ever think of. They get introduced to the girl's brother who was playing golf on the lawn. The girl takes my dad and his cousin inside the mansion. She shows them a huge museum/greenhouse room that has fossil dinosaur reconstructions, amazing trees and plants that they've never seen. They spend a few hours walking around the house, and my dad tells the girl it's time for them to leave. So, my dad and his cousin return home. But the next day, he goes back alone. He sees the same mansion, but it looks super old and overgrown. It's covered in vines and barely intact, and he's thinking, what the frick is going on here? Now, the reason that my dad thinks that this was a supernatural encounter is because fairies often put you under a spell called Glamour, where your surroundings seem more beautiful than they actually are. This is why the mansion appeared so beautiful when he was there with the girl, and he saw the museum room and the greenhouse room, and everything looked impossibly amazing. But when he came back the next day, it was as if it had been abandoned for decades. This is how fairies trap humans in their world. They put a glamour spell on them and then get them to eat their food, because without the glamour, the food is just things like dirt and leaves and bugs and stuff. And once you've eaten fairy food, you're trapped in their world forever. I've told this story in places before, but here goes anyways. I was on holiday down in Cornwall when I was around 14 or so. On the drive back, we noticed a sign for a little forested area and we decided to stop. We all go for a walk, but at some point, I decide to split up from the rest of the family to go exploring. I somehow ended up going off the trails and getting totally lost amongst the trees. I'm not really bothered, it was a nice sense of adventure. I step into this slight clearing or grove area in the forest, and suddenly it's like someone hit the mute button on everything. I can't hear the birds, insects, the sound of the nearby river, even the wind in the trees. Everything seems to be unnaturally quiet and still. I notice these little motes of light coming out from the shrubbery. They fly around kind of like you'd expect a butterfly or something, but they glow. I become absolutely fascinated as I watch them start to come closer. And then all of a sudden, there's a bark from down near my legs. I absolutely lose my shit, snapping back to reality. All the ambient noise of the forest comes back. The trees start to move in the wind again. And I look down and there's a golden retriever next to me, wagging its tail and looking up at me with that big dumb grin. Someone back on the path whistles, and it bounds off back to its owner. I follow back to the path and I find my family. They ask me where I went for the last half hour. But for me, I could have sworn it was only 5 or 10 minutes that I've been gone. And nothing else weird happened that day. I'm still not really sure what happened, but it definitely felt like a FAE experience. Now this didn't happen to me, but it's a story that happened to my dad, and he told me just before he passed away. He was in a field working for his uncle, so he's plowing the field, and he's just by a drop-off toward a creek. He sees this weird-looking hut that looks like a sweat lodge. He steps out of the plower because he hears animals coming from the sweat lodge, and I'm talking like a bear, eagle, wolf, every animal that you could name or think of in the northern hemisphere sounds like it's coming from this little hut. And he says, you know what, this is really weird, screw this. So he goes to tell his uncle, and his uncle's face goes flush. He tells him it's a good thing that he never went inside or went any closer. He says it's bad magic. They decide to investigate the next morning, and the next morning, 3 cows are dead on my uncle's farm. And my uncle doesn't say anything other than, let's go investigate the sweat lodge that my dad saw the other day. When they arrive, there's nothing but a circle where the sweat lodge would have been. My uncle says to never tell anybody about what he has seen or heard coming from that place. My dad eventually tells me about it because I was too curious. And now I'm scared that what do I do if this bad Indian magic happens to me? So this happened, I think, around 3 years ago or so. And it's not that special of a really ghost or fae encounter, but it still has a fresh memory for me. I think it was around 1 a.m., not around 3 like you'd think. And I was outside with my family. I was letting our dogs walk at night. And I was just being idle when I noticed, coming from the intersection to our left, I see a small round gray man walking out. He was followed by, if I recall correctly, another small gray man. And behind him, there was like a gray modern 4-seater car, and almost looked like a Toyota or something. Behind the car is 2 other small gray men. I call it the parade because it's easier to remember it like that. This whole experience is silent. Small gray men are wobbling, but the car is silent, and I don't think the wheels are turning at all. A striking detail that I recall from the gray men is that they have pointed hats that remind me of gnomes, except they look like gnome cosplays rather than real gnomes. It was really weird. So I was staring at this thing when I watched them turn at the intersection away from us. I thought that I was absolutely tripping balls. My family didn't look like that they were seeing the same shit that I was seeing. But later on, I tell my mom about it. She gets surprised and almost excited and asks me if it's a parade that I saw. She tells me that a guard friend of hers saw something like a, quote, gray parade once. It's exactly what I saw, and I'm convinced of this weird ghost parade or FAE parade that I saw. This one is about one time when I was seemingly put under a glamour spell. So several years back, I'm living in the city and I was working as a waiter. I'm grabbing a drink one day after work, and the bar that I usually go to plays classic movies on the TV, which is chill. It keeps away that loud, boisterous sports crowd, you know what I mean? Anyways, I'm not even really paying attention to the TV. I'm just messing around on my phone when I hear this girl next to me order. I glance over. There's a girl sitting 2 stools down from me, and she is stunning. Naturally, I strike up a conversation with her. We talk for a while, and she says that she works at the restaurant across the street as a sous chef or something. I'm very intrigued by her because she looks immaculate. She's got this dark brown hair, perfectly styled like a pin-up girl, with bright red lipstick, pale skin, and big brown eyes with long eyelashes. She looks like a classic pin-up girl, only wearing a chef's smock. We talk for a while, and then she finishes her drink. Then she leaves. At this point, I glance up at the TV, and that's when I see her, the same girl that was just sitting next to me, like to a T. It was crazy. My jaw drops, and I call the bartender over, and I ask him, "Hey, did you see that girl that was just in here? Doesn't she look exactly like the actress in this movie?" I expected him to be as shocked as me, but he turns around and looks confused and says, "The girl that was sitting next to you was a thin blonde girl with acne all over her face." I am WTFing hard, and I try to argue with him. Anyway, long story short, I just let it drop. Later, I looked up the actress from the movie. Her name was Norma Shearer. This is exactly what the girl looked like. I would have played this off as just some girl who was going for that look, but the bartender maintained that the girl who came in was completely different. So, what did you think of those stories? Do you think they were real, or do you think they were fake? Let me know what you think down in the comments. And, have you had your own experience with the Fae? Let me know about that too if you don't mind. I'd love to hear it. And while I was reading all these and just going through different stories that could be Fae and stuff, it reminded me of a story that someone in my class when I was like really young told me. So now here in Canada we call kindergarten to 3, we call that primary school. So it was during that time. I'm not quite sure what grade I was in, I just remember the story. So this would have been like the late 90s into early 2000s and all that kind of beginning of the decade stuff. So this is also before cell phones or even digital cameras were pretty widespread. I remember our teacher had one, but it was like $500 or something like that. Anyways, so in this community, there was a lot of woods, just straight up wilderness. There was like trails and stuff, but if you go off the trails, it's just wilderness for God knows how far. And of course, as kids, it was our duty, we thought, to go and map the woods out and explore and all that cool stuff. So we built forts in the woods. We set like booby traps and all that stuff. It was a fun time, really. So when I read the one about the lodge, it really kind of jogged my memory about a time when some girls who used to also think it was fun to explore the woods said that they found this weird camp out in the middle of the woods, and then they went back the next day and it wasn't there. So I, along with them, we kind of snuck away from the playground area during our recess and we tried to find it. And I can tell you that we spent every day for like a week or two, I think it was, trying to find this cabin. They would keep taking us back to the same place every time, the same place off the trail every single time. And at one point, I don't know, I think the only weird coincidence was that it might have been a full moon the night before. So we go there the day after, and there's a big fairy circle right where they said the cabin was. And as kids, we were just like, oh, that's a little weird. But when I read that story and other stories about fairy circles in the past, it just kind of reminded me of it. So let me know what you think that was, because I have no clue at all. I mean, they could have just made up the story about the camp. That's very possible. I never took these people for the type to really lie about that and then lead us all out to the middle of the woods to the same spot every day trying to catch the glimpse of the cabin, but you never know. Kids are weird. So let me know what you thought of the video, and if you want to, you can like and subscribe and all that spicy stuff. And I have a Patreon and a PayPal as well if you would like to donate to that, if that's your thing. The Patreon tiers are just general support tiers. I think one is $2 and one is $3, and that's Canadian dollars. So basically Monopoly money. But yeah, I'll catch you in the next one, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching.